But coming up next is a longtime friend of mine. His name is Bruce McNicol, and he has co-authored best-selling books on this very topic of integrated leadership. And in fact, one of his books was required reading for me as I was getting my leadership degree at Fuller Theological Seminary, The Ascent of a Leader. Bruce is also a founding partner of Trueface and now serves as President Emeritus of Trueface. And Trueface is an organization that's dedicated to grace and truth. The principles of Trueface have personally impacted my life, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this time with Bruce. So take it away, and I'll pull up your PowerPoint, Bruce.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you, Susie, and with this whole integrated leadership team today and with our audience. Um, it's a privilege. You may remember the DreamWorks movie set in the 1960s in Jackson, Mississippi. One of the features of this film called The Help is a little girl who's a bit chubby in a high society family that values thin. And so she experiences a shaming environment from her parents. But just the opposite is what she experiences from her nanny, who teaches her three phrases that align with that environment, which are you is kind, you is smart, and you is important. And this gives hope to the little girl's hopeless world, gives her an imagination, and ultimately changes her life. Environments do that. They are so powerful that all of us know we've been affected by them. Some of these environments are healthy, some are unhealthy, some are life giving, some are life sucking, some are environments of shame, and some are environments of grace. And since I was a little kid, I've had fears of fear of being rejected, or fear of failure, or insecurities, uncertainties, setbacks, shame, all kinds of things. And I still today, in various situations, deal with those same feelings. I don't know where I'd be today, apart from giving you a compelling hope that has given me much hope and is still doing that today by sharing with you that environments of grace actually create a space for resiliency and transformation and so much more. I want to give you three concepts in this area. First is why environments are more powerful than words when the two conflict. And second, why environments of grace are the most powerful of all the environments, and how to nurture an environment of grace in your life and leadership. Now, for purposes of this talk, we'll use the word environment interchangeably with community and with culture. Culture is simply how we do things around here. And climate is how we feel about how we do things around here. So an environment is just a space in which to operate. Now, this first idea is that environments are more powerful than words when the two conflict due to a simple law of communication, which says when two forms of communication conflict, the one that's most crafted is least believed. The one you work the hardest on is least believed. Sometimes we're working so hard on our words, we forget that's not always the most important thing that we could be doing. For example, if you grew up in a village or a school or a community that was all the time talking admirably about justice and mercy and caring for the poor, but never or rarely engaged in such activity, you wouldn't hear their words. Their actions would speak so loud. And apart from a breakthrough in your own life, you would be formed, you would grow up to be, as social scientists will tell us, like your teachers, like your parents, like your influencers, because environments are that powerful, especially when experienced over time. Here's another example. The American Medical Association discovered that cardiac care units where the general mood of the nurses was depressed, had a death rate in those units 4 times greater than on comparable units. Environments are powerful. Environments of grace are actually the most powerful of all. Some people will offer you some counsel on how to improve the environment around you. Use your car less. Reduce your intake of red meat. Share your green ideas with others. Become politically active. These are all nice thoughts, and they are helpful to the environment. However, environments of grace functions on a whole different order of magnitude. And there's a simple truth behind this, and that is that God invented environments of grace. He powers them. And when he does, all bets are off as to the flourishing that is going to take place. As a Jesus follower, I believe that every act of grace comes from a God of grace. I believe also that because everyone on the planet is made in the image of God, that is why an image of a God of grace, that's why they understand grace. That's why they can experience it. That's why they can thrive in grace. Grace is much more an environment that you enter than simply concepts to believe. And if this was obvious to more people, they'd be looking for a door. They'd be looking for a way to enter this realm of grace. So let me point you back to the original realm of grace. I think it will inspire you. God says, hey, walk on in, come on into my room of grace, that you can find mercy and grace to help you in your time of need, which time of need I discover is like 24/7. Like all environments, grace has particles to it, like affirmation, acceptance, attention. Grace is invitational. It's attractional. It's missional. It gets down in the dirt with you, and it will deal with your needs and insecurities and fears. It is powerful that way. Probably the biggest expression of grace, the biggest particle, the most powerful is love. Love that is designed to heal our hurts. And we all have hurts. Well, you've been wounded if you've been a leader for more than 2 weeks. This can be a dicey area to be in. It can take all our courage. For another day, but just to remind us that grace is a safe place, but it is not a soft place. It's a safe place, not a soft place. Grace is the place where the truth about how I'm doing, how you're doing, how we're actually doing together will flow most freely and with the greatest kindness. Nancy Ortberg shared about this late philosopher, Dallas Willard. And one time he said, the environment of grace may be the most overlooked area in the maturing of families, businesses, schools, and churches. James Kouzes is perhaps a name you recognize because he is a co-author on a book that is regularly voted one of the top 100 business books of all time, The Leadership Challenge. When Jim read our first book on environments of grace, he used a word we did not use, but is remarkable, poignant. He said, these environments will embrace you and show you how magic happens when leaders of character nurture environments filled with grace. That's the right word. It is magic. It is God's magic. It is transforming. It is stunning. You can create an environment of grace even in a macro toxic environment. And that's why I like watching Abilene, the nanny, at work in the movie The Help, because she's got toxic environments churning all around her. And yet she creates this little space, this bubble, this island of health for a crucial little person. Changes her world. you can light up the darkness too. You can do that very same thing. So let's just, for the last few minutes, talk about a few tips on how to nurture an environment of grace, a culture of grace. How do we do that? There's an ancient, famous proverb that says, God resists the proud, but he gives grace to another kind of person, to a humble person. Well, that tells us a few things right away. That if we're ever going to nurture a culture of grace, we will have to find it functioning as humility in us first, because apparently humility attracts God's grace. So we need to know who are the humble? What is humility? And we define trusting God and others with me as humility. Trusting God and others with me. One of the first objectives of Passion Talks International is to have a humble dialogue around worthwhile topics. Well, this is a worthwhile topic. So let's talk about how to have a humble dialogue. Let's talk about how would we function in humility. This definition, you'll notice, is not ethereal. It's functional. You can actually tell when you are operating in humility, and others can too, because they will find you asking the questions that stem from this definition. A question like, who do I trust with me? Who do I trust with me? And maybe a face or two will come to mind for you, but that's a vulnerable question. And conversely, here's another vulnerable question. Who trusts me with themselves? And maybe again, a face or two will come to mind. There are more risky questions ahead for the humble leader, for the one functioning actually in humility, attracting God's grace, which takes us to a territory that we have no control over, but God does. Here's a question. How am I, as a leader, affecting you? How do you experience me? Or what strengths do you see in me that I'm not using because you perceive that I might fear failing in those strengths? Or I compare my strengths in that area to others who have similar strengths. Or I may fear success and not know what to do with it. Or here's another question. What weaknesses, limitations, and idiosyncrasies do you see in me that you may need to protect in me, not excuse, but protect, because I have proven I cannot get well in isolation. I cannot get well on my own. I need you to protect, not excuse me. So these are some challenging questions. However, you can be encouraged by a couple of things that grace manifests itself in. One is that grace specializes in imperfection, and grace takes the long view. So when you're thinking about, will you ever be burned by somebody you trust? Of course you will. So does that mean you should just trust you with you? Should I just trust me with me? Not at all. That would limit you to your own resources. And that's not nearly enough to lead transformationally in this life. You would miss the magic. You would miss the maturing into the dreams that God has dreamed for you. Because that's where that proverb ends, where he says, I want to give you influence. I have a way to do it, and it starts with your humility. Then I give you grace. Then I lift you up. I give you influence. So he's got dreams for you. It's fantastic. If environments were easy and fast to nurture, we might be working on environments more than words. But it turns out words are easier. Environments take time. They get tested. They get fact-checked for authenticity. They're messy. But these two understandings, that grace specializes in imperfection and that grace takes the long view, when put together, will give you courage to, as a leader, be first on the beach. This is someone having to take a risk first. And that is what a humble leader does. And you will know that your vulnerability will foster more vulnerability. You'll be surprised in your team, your family, your organization, wherever you might lead, at what happens with individuals who watch you lead with vulnerability. God's room of grace is vast. So much more to explore beyond our time today. So if this is a worthwhile topic for you, a timely topic for you, I would encourage you to listen to or read one of our two books on environments of grace. We mentioned the first one, The Ascent of a Leader. The second one is called The Cure. Glenn Keane is the animating director for a bunch of blockbusters like Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and Tarzan and Pocahontas and much more. And so you would imagine that he would come up with an animated reflection after he read The Cure on environments of grace. And this is what he says. The cure is like standing on the edge of a rocky cliff over a crystal blue lake. You watch with amazement as your friends leap off and splash into the cool waters below. You long for the courage to do the same, to leap into the blue and into the incomparable adventure of grace. What holds us back? Why do we hesitate? What do we have to lose? Teetering on the edge, the cure comes along and gives you a gentle push. So I'd just like you to consider these past few minutes as a gentle push into the incomparable adventure of grace. The leap into those cool blue waters could actually change your life beyond your imagination and deal with those fears and insecurities and give you the privilege of transforming the world around you forever.
Wow, Bruce. Thank you so much for that. You know, every time I hear you talk about environments of grace, it kind of blows my mind. Um, you know, because I grew up thinking that grace was this thing that I kind of earned somehow, you know, and yet, you know, you talk about grace as an environment. It's a whole new way of thinking about grace, how we step into it, and it's safe but not soft. Um, that's huge. I'm really looking forward to the time when all of our speakers can convene at the end of our session for a little back and forth on some of these concepts. So I'm definitely going to hear some more about how grace is the most overlooked aspect of maturing of businesses. Okay, that we need to hear more about that. So get ready. We'll talk about that during our panel discussion for sure.